Hey guys, and welcome back to the Mudstuds and Skullcaps podcast. I'm Robin.
And I'm Kelsey, and in today's episode, we're going to break down what has been advertised as perhaps one of the most innovative inventions in the saddle industry, adjustable saddles. But can they deliver the perfect fit just like their ads describe? Hey guys, if you haven't done so already, check out last week's episode where we discussed all things first ponies. Find out why even as an adult, I still totally want a pony for Christmas, and a few things to consider before buying a brand new family member. Just starting your holiday shopping list, trying to figure out what to get everyone? If you're worried a pony might not fit in the mail, how about recommending a great podcast? You could even leave a review on the Apple Podcast app to make sure they find it when they search the app. Or better yet, use the share feature and send your favorite episode right to their email or in a text. Robin and I do this constantly when we are trying to share an awesome episode we just listened to or a new favorite podcast one of us just found. We really appreciate this, guys, and thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you guys. And now to get into today's topic, which is all about the adjustability of saddles out there on the market and what ads are presenting to us and how they might not necessarily be speaking the whole truth.
Yes, so I do want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. We are not professional saddle fitters. We have no formal education in this topic. However, we have spent the last week researching. Oh my gosh, I get so tongue-tied. The last week researching, digging into patents, looking at product websites and saddle fitter blogs on this topic. And I think we're providing a really good in-depth understanding of some of these design features and how they actually work. But if you do have questions and you are curious if this would work for you or your horse, I would recommend contacting your local saddle fitter to have them come out and look at how they would fit on your horse. Or if you have further questions, you can contact the manufacturer as well.
Yes, this is no way in place of needing professional saddle fitter guidance or anything of that nature. This is just kind of, I guess, our take and what we're able to find to research and back up claims that we're hearing.
Yeah, and I think busting some myths, because even myself, like just a couple weeks ago, was telling someone about a saddle they wanted to buy, and I was like, it doesn't matter if it fits your horse or not, buy it because you can adjust it to fit your horse. And after doing this research, I was like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. That was stupid. Like that's not true.
Right? I started realizing like old claims that I had made, or like even just a couple weeks ago, things that I had said about one of my saddles and its adjustability features. I can change it, make as much as I want. It'll fit a bunch of different horses. This is why I bought the saddles, because this is the one jump saddle I need. I don't have to buy another one. And then I was like, oh, I didn't understand my saddle at all.
Yeah, and I think that is in part due to the ads that these companies put out there, is they do claim that these saddles will fit all horses and that this is the last saddle you'll ever need to own. And in reality, that's unfortunately just not the case. There's a lot to consider with these saddles. It may be the last saddle you ever have to buy, depending on the shape of your horse. It may be true. But I think this is a case of, at least for the saddles I researched, I looked into interchangeable gullets, which I'll start talking about in a second. But this is a case of where marketing and the design team did not talk to each other. They were not doing the same thing. They were creating two different products, essentially. Marketing advertised one product, and design and research and development created a different product. I'm sure this is happening with a lot of these saddles, where the intent behind them is very specific, but they get advertised as being able to do a much broader range of things.
I think that's any product, honestly, out there. I mean, even we ran into that with the blankets, like the ceramic stuff is,
yeah,
they want to advertise it as like a cure-all, fixes all, does all. And that, nothing does that.
Yeah, I'll get more into this in a minute with when I start talking about mine. Because I think part of this actually does have to, we didn't start to understand saddle fit until recently. Once we got pressure mats and were able to put those under saddles, which was the early 2000s, that's when we started to realize that, oh my goodness, there's a lot more at play here than just the withers. And that's where saddle fit was stuck for so long, was did the saddle clear the horse's withers and was the rider level? And that was it. That was all we really knew. And that didn't even come around until the late 80s. We started to realize wither clearance was important. And then into the 90s is when wither clearance really took off. And that's where we're seeing a lot of these adjustable saddles that's where they're coming from, is this time period.
So what is the differences in your gullets? Because you had, what was it, the interchangeable and changeable or something like that?
So yeah, there's two okay, so let's get into it then. Let's not waste any more time. So for my portion of this research project, or this group project, I decided to research interchangeable gullets.
Project.
It's a group project. It feels like a group project.
Uh-oh, I know which leg I am then. I know which member of the group I am.
No. We're both in this equally. So there are two types of adjustable gullets. There are the ones that are changeable gullets, and this is going to be things like spring trees or your rotate to fit or the Genesis adjustable saddles. So these are advertised a little bit as adjustable trees. I think you're going to talk about this in a minute, but
Yes.
Really it's like the gullet that you're changing the width of. So spring trees, right, you have to kind of sit down in them and then they adjust a little bit. They don't have a ton of play, either of these types. And then the second type of changeable or adjustable gullet is the interchangeable gullet. And this is what Wintecs are known for. They have that easy change gullet system. Pessoa has a whole range as well called the exchange system. And then I don't know that Thorowgood has named theirs, but they also have a gullet plate, a gullet changing system. So a lot of these ads claim that this is, and like this is off their websites, the total saddle fit solution. Totally customizable. That is a copy and paste off of someone's website. What is it and how does it work? An interchangeable gullet is actually, the term itself is super misleading. So you're not actually changing the gullet in the American sense of the definition. This is actually the Australian sense, the Australian definition that we're using for gullet. So a gullet in Australia is the part underneath the pommel. So like the part that would go directly over the withers and create that arc. So it's not the pommel, it's underneath it. Just that portion is called the gullet in Australia. And the reason we call these interchangeable gullets or adjustable gullets is because Australia, an Australian company, invented them. That's Bates. So Bates Saddlery is from Australia. They came around in like the 1930s. They're one of I think they're the biggest saddle company in the world, but they invented Wintec as well as one of their saddle brands.
Did you find in your research that all of a sudden, like all these other saddle brands, at one point it was just really like Bates, I guess, and one brand that was producing these changeable gullets, and then all of a sudden a bunch of other saddle brands popped up with their own series and like their own versions of it? And actually, I found out that it was because the patent information and like the restrictions on who had created it originally, it changed. And that's what allowed all these other companies to start using that and putting it into their own brands and products, which I thought was really interesting.
So that was some of the tea I was going to spill at the end. Thanks for ruining it.
Sorry, my bad.
Yes, I've got a little bit more to the story than just that. I actually didn't know that part of the story entirely, but I was doing a lot of patent research and was starting to realize that some names were appearing, some very similar names were appearing on all of them. It does appear that the changeable gullet scene is actually a rather close-knit family. There's only a couple of designers out there, actually, that are making these and creating them. But yes, there's some, not just patents becoming available, but there were some sales of patents and saddle designs occurring. So I was going to save that to the end. Okay.
Sorry. I thought I was clever. I wanted to share what I had learned.
I did not. I don't know how you learned that, if you found like an article, but I just deduced that off of the names on the patents and some of the legal language that was on them. So I did real detective work. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, I was reading a different patent. I think it was one of the ones.
Oh, okay.
It was something, I think, for like the Genesis that they were. I think they were seeking a patent for their own, and they talked in it how the other patent was now being used across the market because the terms of it had like come to date. Like their patent only lasts.
Yeah, so patents expire. Yes.
Yeah, so theirs had expired, and all these other companies have been waiting to like poach it.
Yeah, I think that's part of the story. I also found some other language that says there's also some sales. People were also buying patents from each other. So not everyone had to wait for the date to expire. But anyways.
I'll let you get back to your explanation now.
Okay. So anyways, right, changeable gullet. The gullet is just that piece underneath the pommel. So Bates actually first introduced this idea back in the 70s, and this was only available in 3 options, narrow, medium, and wide, but those gullets had to be changed by a saddler, so you had to actually take it to a saddle fitter, and they would be able to adjust the 3 different sizes back in the 70s. So that may have been the gullet that you saw expiring. It may have been that 70s patent. It wasn't until the late 90s when they actually invented what we now think of as a gullet system, which is that easy change gullet system that the Wintec is very familiar with. And then there are a couple other brands that also have their version, such as Pessoa, Exchange, and then like the Thorowgood family has theirs as well. And basically the big sales of this was that you could do this at home, and it made you the saddle fitter, and you didn't have to take it to someone or have someone come out to your barn to do it. So the design intent around these interchangeable gullets, and I think all adjustable saddles, is something that's super misunderstood. The marketing department obviously was not talking to those who invented the product at all. So I'm going to read from the patent, from one of the patents. This is a 2007 patent from Pedro Ruiz Diaz. He is the guy who does Pessoa and Anki, and I don't remember what the third saddle is, but he is part of their design team for interchangeable gullets. In his patent, he talks a little bit about how if you have multiple horses, you have multiple saddles. But in other situations, when only one horse is employed, it may happen that in short or long periods of time, the anatomy of the horse has changed in an extent that the saddle usually employed for that horse becomes anatomically inappropriate. This is frequent complications when the horse gets weight or loses weight, thus varying the angular profile of the back, thereof particularly the horse's withers. Since the saddle has been designed with a predetermined angle to fit the former horse's anatomy, the saddle will not yield its form to the anatomy changes and will not fit adequately. So this comes from a 2007 patent. And basically he goes on to try to explain that this changeable gullet design is for weight loss and muscle loss. It is for you fit the saddle to the horse, and then if your horse's muscling changes, you can adjust the wither clearance. There is some concern over this, though, that I did find is that the research doesn't support that the horse only changes weight at the withers. It actually changes weight along its back as well. When you think about a fat horse, skinny horse, they're also gaining weight along their spine. So this kind of actually makes it doesn't quite hold up. His design theory doesn't quite hold up because the horse doesn't just lose weight around the withers. That's part of it, but it's not the full story. They also lose or gain weight in other places. But the design intention was that this is one saddle that is fit for the horse, and then as they change, you can adjust it. And I think that's where marketing kind of gets really confused with how you have to fit this saddle first, that you do have to take everything into consideration. Find a saddle that fits the horse, and then if there's small changes, you can change the gullet.
Yeah, I was finding that a lot, is that you can't just take the saddle off the rack and apply it to absolutely every single horse and have it fit them. You have to have the saddle already like a baseline fit to the horse. And I was also finding, like, I saw one person there mentioning flocking is kind of the fine tuning of the fit of the saddle. It's not you can take any saddle and flock it to fit the horse. There has to be an underlying base of fit already happening with that saddle and the horse, and then you have the minute adjustments from there.
Okay, I think it's great that we read the same blog post, but I'm gonna need you to just slow your roll, kid.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. But yeah, that's absolutely true, right? Flocking is the last piece. It's the icing on the cake, as they would say.
So what blog did you read?
That's from the Horse's Back, which I'm going to talk more about in a minute. She actually does discuss Wintecs in a couple different posts, which is the two. I'm going to discuss Wintecs and Thorowgoods in just a second. But yes, basically these saddles do, so like the good and the bad. The problem with these saddles is that there are 9 points of saddle fit, and that wither clearance is only one of those 9 areas that we look at to see if a saddle fits our horses. And so when we're looking at just a saddle that has an interchangeable gullet or interchangeable gullet, it does not mean it fits the rest of the horse. Sort of the biggest problem with it is that there's a lot of things going on with these horses' bodies that require a range of saddle fit criteria to be met. And some of that can be met through flocking, some of that can be met through an interchangeable gullet or having a gullet that fits or wither clearance. But then there's a lot of other things such as the length of the saddle. Is the saddle straight? How wide is the channel? There's a lot of things that to be considered that an interchangeable gullet does not change the width of the channel. So there are, like I mentioned, the 3 types of interchangeable are the easy change, which is Bates and Wintec and Arena saddles. You have the R bar and the S bar, because I don't think Thorowgood has a cute name. That's Thorowgood and Ketton Masters. And then you have the exchange system, which is Pessoa and Anki. For this, like I said, I'm just going to talk about Wintec and Thorowgoods to compare these two, because I do think that they are sort of the more common ones out there, and they were the ones that I found like the most information about. And I have one of these saddles. Actually, I've had both of these saddles. I haven't had a Pessoa, so I was going to focus on the saddles I had. So I kind of already talked a little bit about the history of the Wintec saddle. This was created by Bates, that they got their first patents back in like 1985 to create synthetic saddles made out of diving material. Those did not have interchangeable gullets originally. They did later. Back in the late 90s, they did start to incorporate these interchangeable gullets into their saddles and into the design. So they have 7 gullet sizes that you can purchase, plus the 3 new ones, so for a range of 10. So they start from narrow and they go all the way through wide, and then they have 3 additional sizes that are like super wides. At some point, I just imagine they're going to come out with like a straight bar and be like, this is a gullet, because these are like super wide. These gullet bars are more of a U shape to them, right? You can have either a U shape or an I shape, A shape, not I shape. That's a straight bar. You could have a U shape or an A shape. And so they're like the top of, if you're thinking of like a mountain or whatever, they kind of look like triangles. The top one is more open. It's more of an open curve.
Or if you think of the letters, like an A and like a U.
Well, it's not quite pointed. Like the A one's not pointed. It's not like a sharp point. It's more of like, it's just more open or more closed curve. That's all. I think the A actually looks more like a U. I don't know what the one actually looks like, because it's like, no, there's not a letter like that. Anyways, so yes, all 10 of theirs do have that U shape, where I'll talk about the Thorowgoods more later, but they do have both A and U shaped in theirs. They also have something interesting with their gullet design, which we will, again, discuss when we get to the Thorowgood one, because I think it's important to compare these 2 gullets to each other. So we'll come back to Wintec gullet shape, because there's some interesting stuff going on there, but there's also some interesting stuff going on everywhere with the Wintec. So for many of you guys know, we're going to talk just a minute about flocking, and specifically Wintec's flocking systems that they have, and not necessarily just flocking in general, and the benefits of different types. Because saddles can be flocked with a range of different materials, from wool to synthetic wool, foam, even air. There is air, which is not care. So Bates saddles and Wintec saddles, the new ones all use what's called the care cushion system. What do you think? Did you look into the care system? Can I get an honest feedback from you?
I did not look into the care system at all.
Okay, so they are supposed to be filled with air. That is what their the claim is. They're not actually air, they're just foam that has air included in the bag. So basically what they have done, so this is from their patent. This is their abstract on the patent. It says a saddle for equestrian use has panels having sealed airbags filled with air at atmospheric pressure to permit an even pressure to be applied over the back of the horse. The interior of the panel above the airbags is filled with packing material to permit adjustment of the fit of the saddle on the horse throughout the working life of the saddle. So that's the abstract. In reality, if you continue to read the patent, it's actually filled with a foam, an open-celled foam that does allow airflow. But these are, you kind of have to see a picture of them, but imagine the plastic boot trees you get if you buy a new pair of boots. They come with inflatable boot trees.
Yeah.
It's basically that material with foam in it, and they're very flat. They do not take up the entire panel. So when you look at what else is in the panel, that care insert is going to be at the bottom touching the horse, and then everything above it is going to be foam. They do have pockets where you can add your own flocking if you want to it. As well as we'll talk about their other system in just a second, where they do have one where you can flock yourself. You don't even need a saddle fitter.
That seems dangerous.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in a second. It just seems really dangerous. Sorry, guys. So basically the idea is that because these panels have, or these care packets have air in them, which they do have some air in them. I'm not going to say they don't. They definitely have air in them. It's just not an air packet. It's a foam packet. And I think that's where there's some confusion, is a lot of people think it's air, and it's not air, because there is actually something called a flare flocking, which is air. It is actually air, and that is second underneath wool flocking is these actual air filled bladders that you put in the saddle. But anyways, the idea is that this air will mold to the horse's body. So this is off of their website. This is some of the advertising they use to describe the care panels. Once the rider's weight is in the saddle, the air cushions are effectively sandwiched between the tree and the horse's back. Under the rider's weight, the air becomes dynamic, continually molding to mirror the horse's moving muscles. This achieves an even contact over a much larger footprint, or weight-bearing area on the horse's back. Increasing the weight-bearing area results in significantly lowering the pressure. Then they include an equation. Like, yeah, we get it. Even weight distribution over the full weight-bearing area of the saddle maximizes the comfort of the horse and increases their freedom of movement. Basically, they're like justification. Like, see, if, bigger area means less pressure versus a smaller area means more pressure. And so they included the, like, equation as, like, their reference to show you how it works. And it's like, yeah, that is not helpful. Like, it doesn't prove that this works. It just proves that is a theory. Like, that equation works.
We know how surface area works.
Yeah, we know how surface areas works. No one's denying that. What we're denying is, or concerned or confused or want proof of, because again, there's no research. Like, this is another one of those horse worlds where there's actually no research on any of this that is publicly available. The companies do refer to their own private research that they've done, which is locked in a vault somewhere that we don't have access to.
Yeah, they kindly don't share any of it with the public, those of us that have questions and are trying to figure it out.
So that's the claim, is that it will mold to the horse's back while you're riding them, and that it changes. And the great thing about this is that you can take this saddle on any horse, unlike wolf locking, which conforms to the horse you're riding, and so then you're like stuck with it. So that's kind of what they advertise it as. In a blog post on the Horse's Back blog, which is called How Much Do You Care What's Inside Your Saddle, she kind of dissects some Wintec saddles, or I think she's actually collected a bunch of photos and images from other people who have dissected their saddles. I really want my Wintec back now so I can dissect it. But basically what she has found, and a lot of people have found, and this actually matches with what the patent shows. Well, the patent says they would like it to ideally be one packet, so like one pocket that you insert as that air foam panel in the saddle. They actually show it as being 3 panels, and the way they design it is that those panels overlap, so there's no gapping, but there's overlapping. So that means you have pressure points in that saddle, in that panel, where the panel is overlapping each piece by a couple inches. So you have that middle piece, because it's 3, it's one for the front of the saddle, one for the back of the saddle, and then one for the middle. That middle piece overlaps the front and back by a couple inches. So I don't know how you wouldn't have a band on each side that you would feel.
And is that overlapping that you're talking about, that's directly at the bottom of the panel where it'd be against the horse's back, right? That's not what's sitting on top of the foam.
Correct. So that is directly against the horse is where this air would be. I do think they have some open cell foam further up that's protected, and then there is a pocket. Theoretically, their theory is that you can, if you want, put flocking between the care and the upper cushioning.
There has to be pressure points that it's causing.
There has to be pressure points. And so a lot of the photos that she was showing, in some of them, guys, the company was taping them together for a period. These packets were being, instead of being one continuous design, one in continuous pocket, they were taping the 3 pieces together and sticking them in.
Oh my God.
With packing tape. Like, not even like...
Do you know what year those saddles were? Or like when?
I do not know what year those saddles were. So this is a 2017 blog post, and she says some of those photos are 5 years old. So I'm thinking these are going to be some of the older ones, not the newer ones, because I have also seen photos that show one solid panel coming out. And when I see one solid panel coming out, most of the time, I've seen one image, and I've looked at probably like, I don't know, maybe 10 images. One of the images did show the panels coming out and they were still inflated. All the others showed lumpy, deflated, hard looking panels that were like wrinkled and taped together. So it does look like it is common for them to lose, to like basically pop or become deflated. And then it looks like it's a vacuum sealed type foam deal. And when that happens, it gets a bunch of wrinkles in it. If it's taped together, that tape can start to come apart due to heat, just that getting hot, and tape doesn't last forever. So there are a lot of issues with these care panels. This isn't something like the company talks about you can find anywhere. The only times I'm finding this information is on like blog posts and forums where they're talking about what these panels actually are. I would avoid the air panels if I were you, just because I think there's so much, they're not quite what they say they are. They're not actually air, and my understanding is that the research around air, and I haven't looked into it yet, but the research around air is actually quite good, but these aren't air. So a lot of the claims they're making is based off of a full, like the flare panels, and that these aren't flare panels.
I'm curious, like, why they called these panels the care ones, then you have the flare ones, if they were going for some type of name confusion.
I don't know. So flare, and I don't know if they're who came first or what. I didn't see that the flare was a specific brand name, but more just like the common name. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry guys, I did not look into flare panels. I just found them mentioned on one blog, but those are the ones that you guys remember. Sometimes you can like inflate your saddles. I do remember there being like a time where you could like pump up your panels or like deflate your panels, and that is flare.
Okay.
I just don't know like what flare is besides for like, I do remember the being able to pump. I feel like those were around the same time care came out, and I briefly remember people having to like pump their saddles, and then like that was gone. So I'm not sure what that conversation is. Okay, so that's what the care panels are. I think they're hit and miss. I did see, like I said, I think 2 photos of them come out, and 1 or 2 photos, and they were still inflated. They still looked pretty. They still looked nice, but I saw a lot of photos of them coming out looking very sad, very, very deflated, very wrinkly, very taped together. So the last thing when it comes to Wintec flocking and Bates flocking is that some of their newer saddles, the newer Wintecs, the Wintec 500s in particular that I'm seeing it with, are being advertised as flocked saddles because the public really wants flocked saddles. We just know the benefits of flocking, and traditional wool flocking outweighs the benefits of care, or at least I think a lot of people are just traditionalists maybe in that respect, and they just don't want air. They want that wool flocking. So Wintec came up with a solution. What they do is they take, instead of a panel or a plastic pocket filled with air, they make a felt pocket, stuff it full of cotton balls, and then put that in. And so it's like this rock hard felt pocket filled with the flocking.
What in the world?
It's advertised as flocked, but they don't describe it any more than that. The only reason people know about this is because they've opened up their saddles and been like, that's not what I was looking for or expecting. So yeah, it's just like rock hard flannel flocking sock that is stuffed with cotton balls. And they're probably synthetic cotton balls.
Oh my gosh. That's so unexpected.
Right, and it's not, right, like that's not, if you think you're buying a flocked saddle, you're not thinking you're buying a felt pocket full of cotton balls.
I wonder how they came to that conclusion of an idea. Is like, this is our answer. We're going to shove it full of cotton balls. How did they come to that?
Because it's cheap. Oh, did I not mention these saddles are made in Vietnam? I'm sorry, did I forget that part?
Yeah, you did.
These saddles are all manufactured in Vietnam. They're trying to save some monies there.
There's some saddles that I found that are advertised as being from a certain country, and they actually turn out being made in India or Vietnam or something of that nature, which is not bad that they're being made there, but they're being made there because it's so cheap, and they turn around these saddles that are made very cheap to make a large profit off of them. It's very interesting. There's a very popular French brand that makes their saddles in India, but they sell them as a French saddle.
So that is the reason synthetic saddles were created, and I don't remember if I was going to talk about this later, if I just totally forgot to, but the reason synthetic saddles were created is it wasn't for rider convenience. This has nothing to do with not having to clean your saddle or riding in the rain or just not wanting a leather saddle. That's it. It's cheaper to manufacture. That's it. And you could sell them for close to the same price as a leather saddle.
Yeah, because people think it's for their convenience.
Right, and they think it's for their convenience. They think there's a lot of benefits to it. But, it still has all the same parts and pieces on the inside in theory, but they are a lot cheaper to manufacture. I feel like I'm a little scattered with this.
It's okay. I feel we're both a little all over the place, but which saddle was that's being made in Vietnam, or which brand?
Wintec. All of Bates. Anything Bates is made in Vietnam. I'm not going to buy one of these saddles. I'm not sponsored by any saddle company. I'm good with Wintecs. I probably will never buy one again unless it is to actually dissect it, because that I want to do. But I've ridden Wintecs for a large portion of my riding career, and I never really had problems with them personally. They were fine. They worked, got the job done. But there's some issues with them that like cannot be avoided, which in part is some of these flocking issues, and in part is the gullet issue is actually the big one, which again, we'll get to what the gullet issue is, but...
Well, hurry on up.
I'm trying. Okay, so anyways, the last piece of Wintec's adjustability is they have these riser packs, which are the easy change riser system allows you to customize the saddle panel for your optimal clearance and balance. The risers fit in a Velcro pocket in between the tree and the cushion panel for up to 16 millimeters of lift. This system is convenient, quick, and reversible. Basically, what you can do instead of having a saddle fitter come and add flocking between your care panel or your flocking sock is you can just shove in risers yourself.
Oh, good.
Oh, great. You can shove in as many as you can fit. There is no limit. I have, like, some of the things I saw on the Horseback's blog. She had another post about the adjustability of saddles. Talked about seeing like 12 risers shoved in a saddle. My big qualm with this is the idea around them is that you can change the width of the panel. You can make the panel bigger, you can make it rounder. So you're taking what was a flat panel and you're going to make it rounder. And this could, change the width if you shove it down versus having them further up. All of this you can do to the panel yourself without the help of a saddle fitter. And you could do it however you need. And I was looking at some forums and I was seeing people trying to use these riser pads in place of an actual traditional riser pad in the back of your saddle, and they wanted to use these lifts, and these lifts are just like shims. Just think of them as shims. They're basically the same thing as shims you would put into a saddle pad, like a fleecework saddle pad, but instead you can shove them in your saddle. The problem with this is that I am concerned that this is going to change so much more than just the rider realizes. If all you're doing is shoving a couple lifts in the front of the saddle, how does that affect things like pressure points? How does that affect the angle of the saddle and where its weight is being carried? I just think it's going to change. It cannot be changing things for the good. If you're shoving a bunch of riser panels in the front of the saddle or in the back of the saddle, I just see the weight shifting in a not great way. Does that make sense? And to just do half of it and not the back half. And again, these riser panels all overlap. So wherever they go in, they cover each other for a portion. And that again is double the pressure, double the lift in an area. I don't understand.
I feel like it wouldn't correct anything. All it would do is put the issues elsewhere and like make more problem fitting issues.
Yeah, and I think the real issue, and they do have a little bit of a disclaimer that like after your initial saddle fit, you should have a saddle fitter come out every 3 months to like at first to check it, and then every 6 months. So they do provide some disclaimers. They are starting to actually put disclaimers on their website. Kind of are starting to realize that people are catching on that this isn't everything it's cracked up to be. But the problem with this design is that it really focuses all on the rider and making the rider feel like the saddle fits and not on the horse and actually fitting the saddle to the horse. It's all about the rider's perception versus what the horse is actually feeling.
Yes, I would agree. I think a lot of the issues is these saddles sometimes are pushed towards the rider for comfort rather than the horse for fit.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And that, us as riders think we are doing the best for our horses because, we now have this saddle that was super affordable. I never have to clean it and it will fit every horse I put it on. And that's just not the case. So the last company I wanted to talk about is Thorowgood, that also makes a similar saddle. They also have synthetic saddles just like Wintec has. They have a few different design features in theirs than Wintec, which we're going to talk about. So this company came around in 1994, which matches with patents that I found for the years 91 and 92 by Peter Thorowgood. Though their website does claim that they were started 35 years ago in Wassail, England. My math isn't adding up on that one, Peter, but I love the enthusiasm. And I'm wondering if that 35 years actually is talking about their family of saddle brands, because Thorowgood and Kenton Masters are the same saddle family brand. They're like the same company, including there's a third saddle company that's also the same, and that is Fairfax. Fairfax is also
Are they really? Because Fairfax kept coming up in my stuff that I was looking at.
Yes, so
I
Fairfax,
did not know that.
Kenton Masters, and Thorowgood are all the same company. They're just their different lines of saddles. So the Thorowgood line is their like bottom line saddles, and then I think Kenton Masters is their midline, and I think Fairfax is their like fancy line. But yeah, so Fairfax, which we talked about previously in our trendy tech episode as being one of the only companies that researches their equipment, some testing and some publicly available research, owns Thorowgood and Kenton Masters. They did not do any research that I could find on Thorowgoods. They are also the only synthetic saddles that are not manufactured in the Far East or India. They are manufactured in England.
Okay.
So they have 8 gullet sizes in 2 different lines. So they have the R line, which is the longer, more A-shaped gullets. And then they have the S line, which are more U-shaped, and they are shorter gullets. And they're straight. So here's the thing, guys, with Wintec gullets are not straight. They are pinched. They have a pinched design in them that makes them have 2 different angles. So Wintec gullets have one angle at the top and a second angle at the bottom. This makes them impossible to fit to a horse. Where that pinch is right at the top of the panel. And it puts pressure on the panel. So if you're looking at your saddle from the front, it should have the same angle from the tree all the way down the panel. It shouldn't have a break. That makes it impossible for a saddle fitter to get the pressure off of the panel and to get the panel the right shape for the horse. Because if the panel's too narrow, you can't go up another gullet because then the gullet's too wide. Thorowgood has straight bars. Their bars have no pinch, no kink. If you don't, I have a picture that we can post with this for you guys to understand. I saw the picture and was like, oh my goodness, the Wintec gullet gets pinched about 3 inches from the top, and then it flares out at the bottom. So the points actually flare out. The Thorowgood is perfectly straight.
I'm thinking about it now because I have Kenton Masters, and so I have interchangeable gullet bars for that one, and they are straight. And I'm thinking about the gullet bars that I remember putting in for the Wintec, and they have that slight indent right beneath the top, and then it flares out.
So I found this information on what's called the Saddle Fitter blog. She has a 2011 article called Changeable Gullets, The Details, and she measures and it's really clear. Look at her photos. She puts all kinds of angles on these gullets so you can compare them, and she talks about them. She says it was an aha moment for sure. Yes, there was definitely an inward kink about halfway down the leg of the Wintec plate, and the lower part of the plate flared out. This creates 2 different angles in the gullet plate, one above the kink. Now, when the gullet is installed in the saddle, the kink corresponds roughly to the top edge of the panels. So technically, the lower part, which would be the tree point on a fixed tree saddle, is one angle, and that angle should be parallel to your horse's back. However, in my experience, this design creates the potential for a great deal of pressure right at the top of the panel.
Oh, interesting. It totally makes sense now I'm thinking about how it's built. Why did I ever realize this before?
I saw her photo and I didn't even read the article. I was kind of skipping around. I was get to the details. Where's the information? And then I saw the picture and I was like, oh my gosh, I know oh my gosh, that is. And no one else has seemed to pick up on this, or at least that I could find. She's the only one that talks about it, and she has a bunch of comments, and everyone seems slightly surprised. I guess there was some mentions in the comments of people trying to fix them with a hammer. Get that kink out. Don't recommend. Just buy a Thorowgood. And at the end of the day, I would not recommend a Wintec to anyone because of this design flaw. And the issue is that this design flaw is not, I looked into it to see if I could find the patents for their head plates. That's what these are called. They're actually not called gullets. They're called head plates. And I could not find the patents anywhere, nor an explanation from anyone as to why there was this design flaw. The only thing I can think of is that they're looking at the withers of the horse and then the muscle below the withers as 2 separate entities deserving of 2 separate angles. And the fact is that's just not true. The concern with this is this the angle shape that they're using in all their saddles? Or is this just Wintecs and the changeable gullets? Or does Bates saddles have this kink in them as well?
Did you look into that at all or no?
No one seems to know. No one's ready to whack open their baits yet. So if you've got a baits and you want to whack it open, I'm curious to know what's the tree in it. And for that fact alone, I would highly recommend staying away from Wintecs. You can, on the Wintecs, I forgot to mention this earlier, you can actually take the panels out. It seems like a lot of people do that. They take out those care panels and that fake flocking and then just reflock it themselves, or like with the saddle fitters help, obviously. Eliminate that portion if you're concerned about it. You cannot eliminate the gullet issue, and you also you can't use a Thorowgood gullet in a Wintec. You'll destroy it. So you're stuck with that company's gullet design, and I think for that reason alone.
Why does it destroy it?
They're different shapes, so they're different lengths, and you would break the tree and damage the tree.
Okay. Well, that's good news for anyone that was like, oh, I'll just buy a different head plate.
Yeah, you can't buy a different head plate. You have to use the one it comes with because of the length and how it connects into the tree. It just isn't set up to accommodate a different company's gullet plate. There's also a lot of other issues with Wintecs with the points breaking off and a lot of damage that can be caused to the tree unbeknownst to the user. So not that can't happen with Thorowgoods. It just isn't. I don't think they're as popular, so there isn't as many people tearing them apart or trying to work with them. So the last little thing with Thorowgoods that I'll mention, because honestly guys, there's not a lot of horrible information out there about Thorowgoods, though I did honestly try to find some bad information because I didn't want this to be biased one way or the other, but it's not there. It does appear that they've had some random issues over the past where some of their original materials they used did start peeling apart, but it sounded like Thorowgood was pretty good about replacing those saddles when the synthetic material started peeling. And then one person in a forum claimed their tree snapped, but I need more information than that. Age of the saddle.
How do you snap a tree?
Don't know. Did you stack it? I there's a lot of information missing there. So the last thing with Thorowgoods is they do have English Jacob sheep wool, which is the best flocking out there. You want the dark brown stuff, not the white lamb's wool. It's okay, but it does ball the lamb's wool. So English Jacob sheep fur. Jacob sheeps are actually really cool. You don't shave them, you shed them. They shed. You know what? I have no idea actually if Jacob sheeps are totally different. Now I'm questioning myself. I was pretty sure about this a minute ago, and now I'm thinking, oh gosh, now I have to look this up. Most saddle fitters that I found in this area or just kind of around the country do adjust Thorowgoods and Wintecs, so they can give you some information about helping to figure out if it does fit your horse. So the last thing with Thorowgoods is their resale. I am seeing this, and it's something super common, that used Thorowgoods, specifically the T8s, are selling for about $1,000 to $2,000.
Really?
They're brand new $900. So just look around when you are buying. If you want to buy a Thorowgood, there's no need to spend over $1,000 for a used saddle when a brand new one is $900. So I don't know why that is, why they seem to go up so much in value after being used, because there's no benefit. You don't need to break in a saddle. You don't want someone else's, that doesn't add value is what I'm saying. So a couple last things with the conclusion of these saddles before I give you the floor. There are 9 points of saddle fit to keep in mind. That's balance, wither clearance, channel width, panel contact, billet alignment, saddle straightness, saddle length, saddle tree angle, saddle tree width. Only one of these can an interchangeable gullet correct, and that would be your wither clearance. So if you think, again, that you are buying a saddle that is the total package, you can totally customize it with a changeable gullet, that's not true. And adding riser pads underneath the paneling is also not a total saddle fit. On the Horseback blog, she did a whole dig into the adjustable saddles, and our friend from the very beginning, Ruo Diaz, who was the guy whose patent I read earlier, actually ended up writing her an email in response to her blog post, and I just wanted to read it because I thought it was really important to hear that the companies themselves are starting to recognize some of these issues. So I am part of the team producing Pessoa, PDS, and Anki saddles. I just want to let you know that we have been working on our saddles for better fitting on the rest of the body and not only the withers. Thanks for your article once again. It was really nice to read your words and realize that with a wrong concept, we have been saying the exchange system was fitting every horse, but there is much more apart from the horse's withers. And that's from the designer himself, who I read, this is a 2019 comment he made, and I read his 2007 opinion earlier. So what a change he has made personally.
Well, it's so interesting because I read that as well earlier. And I think what there's a couple takeaways to take from this is, one, it's the designer that is coming to the realizations and like kind of correcting some of the previous statements they're making with these saddles, not necessarily the brands that are selling them correcting it. Another note, I think it's really interesting that this realization and this kind of change in outlook on these adjustable saddles is coming 2019.
Yeah, 12 years later.
So these saddles that are going to have these improvements probably aren't out on the market yet. They're not, the ones that you're buying aren't going to be taking that into account. So it'd be interesting when those saddles that are adjustable more than just the gullet area really come on the market.
I think this kind of goes back to where we are with saddle fit, is we didn't know about the 9 points of saddle fit until recently. Before that, it was 5 points, and I don't know what the 5 points were. I don't have them memorized, but this didn't even come around until the early 2000s when we got pressure pads. So I will add that Wintec has started adding some official disclaimers to their websites saying that, these are innovative systems, but you do still need a saddle fitter because no one saddle can claim to fit every horse. That is a disclaimer on Easy Change, their official website. So they are starting to recognize that they have maybe oversold or overpromised.
Okay, well, that's good at least.
Okay, so my last little tea drop about the patents that I was gonna throw out there was that, and that this is coming from the patents themselves. I am not a patent expert, but it does appear that Bates actually sold their saddle design to Thorowgood in the 90s, and that is kind of where Thorowgood's first saddle came from, was this Bates design, or this original Wintec design. If you look at the Thorowgood Griffin with the original Wintecs, you'll see that there's a lot of similarities between the two, and they almost look like the same saddle, and it's because he actually bought the design from Kenneth Bates.
You know what? That actually does make a lot of sense, because I think, sorry, I'm trying to think through all my thoughts now. It's not going well. But that actually makes a lot of sense, because I always noticed when Thorowgood especially started coming on the market, there was a lot of similarities between it and Wintec. And now that it makes sense as to why, because they bought the patent.
They bought the patent. And that's from what I think that's what that legal event means in 98. I'm not 100% sure, but it does appear that Thorowgood company bought it in 98. But again, I don't understand patent language entirely, so.
Well, okay, so I guess on that note, we can move on to adjustability beyond the gullet. And I'd like to say my thoughts will be cohesive and in a nice straight line, but I don't think my notes are even remotely that. They're kind of all over the place, which I think, once again, it just goes to show how hard it is to find this information, and how do you phrase the question that you have in your head to Google, so Google will actually answer it and not spit back some random saddle ads at you. And you're like, that was
right.
1 + 1 did not equal 3.
Guys, there are at least 3 to 4 pages worth of saddle companies or tack companies selling Wintecs, and it was this isn't what I want. I don't want to buy one. I want information about one. It was really frustrating.
Well, that was the same issue I was having with the Kenton Masters and stuff, because when I originally bought my Kenton Masters saddle, and I don't think this was on my saddle fitter misleading me, I think it was just me interpreting the information completely incorrectly and thinking that I was being told something completely different. And so I bought my saddle with the idea in my mind that more than just the gullet was adjustable. I bought it that the panels and the whole saddle, the tree, you could essentially change the whole thing because it's adjustable. And so I'd be able to fit so many different horses with this saddle. And so when I went into looking this up, I was trying to figure out what else is adjustable in the Kenton Masters, was what I was essentially looking up. And I think the one thing that I found, that on top of the already adjustable gullet head plates in the Kenton Masters, Thorowgood, and Fairfax saddles, and this is specific to them because what I was reading says that these 3 saddle brands, which turns out to all be the same saddle brand, use this tree, and it's a SEMA tree, which is a adjustable tree essentially.
Okay.
But at the same time, it's not an adjustable tree, which is really frustrating because everything I was looking at, I think the market gets the words, they say it's adjustable tree, and it's not. It's still just talking about the gullet in the very front pommel of the saddle being adjustable. The thing with the SEMA tree is that it's not always built with a fitted replacement gullet bar. This tree is, you can get one where it's just a traditional tree, or you have the adjustable tree. If you get it where it has the adjustable tree, this is what you'll likely find in the Kenton Masters, Thorowgood, or Fairfax. It is fitted with a replacement gullet bar, which allows the saddle to be adjusted to fit a variety of horses. And that adjustability comes from the flexible material within the tree itself, which I tried looking up the material. One, on their website, they don't say what the material is. Googling it, could not find anything that said what the SEMA tree material is. I don't think it was necessarily our typical wood metal combination tree. I don't think it was necessarily a composite. I think from what I was seeing is it's some type of mold and they get the tree from that. But I couldn't figure out, nothing was telling me what this tree was made out of. However, the material that it's made out of apparently is flexible, which allows it to change its shape when you change the gullet bars in it. And when you go to change that, it not only changes the width up front in your saddle, but it also changes the angles of the rails in your saddle. And so that just changes how your panels interact with your horse's back. So if you have a more narrow horse, the angle would be greater. If you have a wider horse, the angle would be lessened to fit more of a tabletop-backed horse. The only thing to remember is, though, these trees only have so much flexibility in them. You still have to buy a saddle with a tree that relatively fits this horse for it to fit your horse. You can't just buy a super wide tree and have it fit your really narrow horse because you crunched it down to fit this gullet bar. That's not how it works. Another thing that I was finding with it is that it was saying when you adjusted the gullet bars in it and you adjusted the tree with this change in the gullet bars, it changed the tree points, which would either lengthen or shorten them. And I was kind of confused as to what tree points were. What is the benefits of a longer or shorter tree point? And it turns out the longer tree point is actually where, for a high withered horse, that's where you need the longer tree points because it allows greater room for the horse's withers. Whereas shorter tree points flattens out that gullet and it's made for more of a flat horse.
Yeah, I think that's the difference between their R gullets and their S gullets, is that the R's are for the higher withered and the S's are for the flatter withered.
Right, which I didn't realize that. I didn't know what the difference was between the R and the S bars until I was looking into this. The other thing I was finding with them, though, is that there are some drawbacks to having a flexible tree in your saddle. One of which is that it can transfer more motion between the horse and rider because that saddle's flexing while you're riding. And another thing is that if you have extreme asymmetry in your own body, or you're extremely physically restricted, or the horse itself has some serious body issues going on, this tree is not going to be the best situation for you and your horse. Most horses and most riders, it works just fine. But for those that have extreme asymmetries in their body, this is not it because it will end up shifting and flexing, I guess, asymmetrical. I couldn't find exactly any better way of phrasing it or anyone presenting it in a better way, saying why it was such a bad idea, but this is kind of how I interpreted their information.
Interesting. Is this in all Thorowgoods or just Kenton Masters or like what's?
So this tree, the SEMA tree, is being used, I believe, in all Kenton Masters, all Thorowgoods, and I want to say all Fairfaxes, but I could be completely wrong. I know for certain this tree is what is in every single adjustable Kenton Masters and adjustable Thorowgood.
Interesting. Okay.
One of the big issues that comes up with these adjustable trees and adjustable saddles is that I think when we start adjusting them too much is they lose their symmetry. And it is absolutely crucial that with these, whatever tree you have in your saddle, whatever gullet bars you have, one of the issues with the Wintec gullet bar, if someone was going to hammer it out, you likely aren't hammering out even. These things have to remain symmetrical. Otherwise, you're going to do serious damage to your horse's back. If you ever have a saddle fitter that says your horse is asymmetrical and you'll build the saddle to fit their crooked back and make the saddle crooked, that is so beyond wrong. You're going to cause so much more damage than anything else. That was pretty much where it ended with actually adjustable trees from what I could find. The other things that were advertising themselves as adjustable trees were the HDR rotate to fit saddle, and that was a weird design. But it essentially has a hole in the pommel that you insert an Allen wrench into, or like a little Allen key, and you twist it. Either you twist it one direction to make the saddle narrow, or you twist it the other direction to widen the gullet of the saddle. Another option that is very similar, but instead of being in the pommel, was the Genesis adjustable tree, which once again, it adjusts pretty much just the gullet area, but it's advertising itself as an adjustable tree. And like you were talking about the 9 points of saddle fit, these are only adjusting the front half of the saddle. They're not adjusting the width of the gullet really, or like the channel of the saddle. They're not adjusting that, and they're not adjusting the back of the saddle. And if you're going to make changes to the front of the saddle, you also have to make changes to the back. Like there's no way only half of your horse is changing that requires this change in the saddle. And I think what these are being sold for is people that are just going to take this saddle off of one horse and plop it onto the next that require a different gullet size. But the issue is the tree with inside these saddles doesn't fit every single horse. So like what my high withered, more angular back thoroughbred requires in a tree is going to be a lot more than what someone's cob pony requires. So it was really frustrating. And then one other thing I did find with the SEMA tree is that you cannot achieve a hoop tree in it. And the hoop is more of for that flatter backed horse with a little bit wider of the withers, or like kind of your warm blood style of horses, at least what I was finding, is the SEMA tree, adjustability in it, you can't achieve that hoop fit. So even with an adjustable tree in a saddle, it's still not going to fit every horse. The core base of the saddle has to fit the horse first for it to be adjustable as that one horse changes, if that makes sense. I don't know if it does.
I mean, and these are all ones that are being advertised as you, the owner, can adjust from home. Because I think, aren't there other saddles like Chalise? Aren't they known for having adjustable saddles, but it takes like a saddle fitter to do work with them?
Oh, I have no idea.
Well, for next time.
And like some of the questions that I was coming up with in my head that I couldn't quite figure out answers to was, in some of these saddles, like the Genesis in particular and the HDR Rotate to Fit, I will link in the description the YouTube videos advertising how to change them, how to like adjust and change them. And the whole time I'm looking at it, it doesn't look like, it looks like you're bending a paper clip and then unbending it. And I can only imagine after so many times of bending it and bending it back, it would break.
Yeah.
And there was actually some quality report issues with the Genesis that screws in it would all of a sudden break or shear off and like it would be stripped. And when that happens, you essentially have a broken tree. And apparently there's limited options for getting them fixed if there's any at all. And you either are out a saddle or you can send it back to the company and get one replacement if you're within that 5-year limited warranty. But if you're outside of that, you're just out a saddle with a broken tree.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like a design flaw for sure then.
And I got so frustrated because everything was advertising adjustable tree. And it's not an adjustable tree. It's still, everything is adjusting itself based off of that one point in the saddle, which is either the gullet bar or the head plate.
Yeah.
And that's only one part that's not addressing the rest of the saddle. So I don't know where I fall. Like, I don't know my opinion on these anymore.
You know, I think if you are starting with the assumption that I want a saddle that fits my horse, and you start with a saddle fitter that comes out and says, yes, this Thorowgood, this Ketton Masters, whatever fits your horse, then I think it's a fine saddle to go with. And then you have a gullet bar that you can change if you need to. So I did buy the Thorowgood originally for Addie. I did not have a saddle fitter come out and look at it at first, but I did after a couple months of riding in it. And my gullet bar did absolutely fit her in the beginning, but as horses start to be ridden, as they go through that phase, there tends to be a period with correct muscling and correct development that their withers grow. Her withers grew because she was now being ridden under saddle and was just like starting to, stretch and develop, and her withers were able to grow because of how the neck muscles stretch and her top line is used. I then needed a smaller gullet for her. She went down 2 sizes, and then we were able to do some minor tweaks with the flocking, but the saddle fit her from the beginning. But we did, because of her age, because she just went under saddle and we were growing the withers and developing the back, the Thorowgood worked out perfectly for that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is that I have a Ketton Masters that my mare absolutely loves. And I got it originally with a professional saddle fitter out to look at it, look how it fit her, and then say, yes, go with this one and this gullet bar. Since then, I have had to change our gullet bar. Like, she didn't drop multiple sizes. It was just one change, and also minor adjustments to the saddle flocking itself. But ultimately, the saddle fit her in the beginning. And I think where these saddles really shine is if you're going to use them with one horse, because it'll be fitting that one horse and you could adjust it continuously to fit your horse. You don't have to always, all of a sudden your saddle no longer fits. You have to buy a new saddle for your one horse. I also found really good results that people are saying is if you buy it for a young horse that's going to continue to develop and grow, is that if it's already going to fit their natural body, now when they grow, you can adjust the saddle to keep fitting them.
Correct. And those young horses, I think this is a great saddle for a young horse because their bodies actually are going to change a lot from just the withers developing and then the muscling developing. You could go through a couple gullet bars in a rather short time. So I think, if you do have this saddle and it does fit and your horse likes it and you like it, this is probably an excellent saddle for a young horse to grow and change in.
Yeah. I think, though, if you're going to look at these adjustable saddles, whether it's the tree, the gullet that you want to change and look at it to be applied across 5 different horses, it's not the saddle. I mean, unless you have 5 different horses that are all the exact same tree shape that they require and like the exact same shape.
And I was actually surprised that I did the 2 horses that I thought were not similar at all in shape actually turned out to be more similar, and the saddle fitter recommended I let them share saddles for a brief period of time until I purchased another one, because there were differences in flocking between what the 2 horses needed, and I'm thinking Dublin, my big thoroughbred with a big deep withers, and like he's starting to get a sway back, and Addie was my younger horse who, she started out kind of flat in the back, and she's a lot rounder than Dublin. They actually ended up wearing the same saddle for a short period of time under the recommendation of the saddle fitter because they were more similar than I realized.
Oh, interesting.
There were differences because they used the same gullet. Everything was kind of the same with the 2 of them. But there were differences where Dublin needed different flocking than Addie because one had more of a flat back and the other was getting a sway back. So it wasn't a long-term solution. But I was surprised to find out that these horses were more similar than I thought.
Yeah. And I think that ultimately goes to, just because you can adjust the saddle yourself doesn't mean that you don't need the advice and the eye of a professional saddle fitter, because that's something that you wouldn't have picked up on your own. And I think that goes to like some of the reviews I was reading on the HDR Rotate to Fit and the Genesis that people are adjusting all on their own, is that they try to adjust it the best they could, and then a few of them, a handful, had professional saddle fitters out that still had to make tweaks and adjustments to actually get the correct width for the horse, for the saddle to fit.
And I think that, the thing with saddle fit is that it's a lot more nuanced than just you shoving some riser pads in or putting a new head plate in. There's a lot more of a nuance to it. And your horse's back, for example, they're not the same left to right, most of us. Most horses aren't built perfectly symmetrical, back to front, side to side. There's going to be a lot of nuances that having a saddle, and this is why I think the Thorowgood and the Kenton Masters do win out, is just that flocking.
Yeah.
Again, it's just the icing on the cake. Everything else has to fit first, but you do have a little bit more flexibility with it in that respect to making a better fit.
My final thoughts are just, if you're going to use it for one horse, it's a good idea, but don't intend to use it on your entire barn.
And that's, that's why I tried to read from that patent in the very beginning, is because, even this was a 2007 patent. It wasn't what was originally wasn't their original patent. I couldn't find the original patents for these changeable gullets. But it wasn't for a multi-horse fit. It is for one single horse whose body adjusts over time due to weight loss or whatever. And I think if that's what you're coming into, your expectation with these saddles is that it has to fit my horse first, and then we can make minor tweaks as they gain muscle, gain weight, lose weight. Then, you know what? You probably are totally fine purchasing one of these saddles. But if your expectation is that this is the last saddle I ever have to buy because it's going to fit everybody, then that's not true.
All right. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's it, guys.
Yes.
Hopefully we made some sense.
Hopefully. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us through this episode. If you did, if you didn't, then you're not here to see us thank you. So there goes that. If you ever have any questions or topics you want us to discuss, you can reach out to us on Instagram at mudstuds_skullcaps, or you can send us an email at mudstudsskullcaps@gmail.com.
Yeah. Are you guys curious about a particular product or a particular ad? Is the ad true? Does the product work that way? Send us an email, send us a message on Instagram, because we are super curious ourselves if these ads hold up to all the hype. So with that, visit that Apple Podcast app, leave a lovely review, a 5-star little review recommendation. We super appreciate it, guys. And with that, stay safe, stay classy, and stay in the saddle.